It's light.
And really, thank you for having me. This has been lined up for some time, and I've been excited about it, and I'm very happy with the turnout, because I was kind of warned it might just be the two of us, so it's really nice to have you all here, and thank you for coming out on kind of
it's too dark.
That was too much?
kind of a gloomy evening. And I'm hoping it won't be foggy when I'm heading back over the mountain. The weather's always different up there. So, questions are fine throughout. I hope because we're such a small group, we could have this as somewhat of a discussion. I'm going to use some slides. It just helps me not forget anything I had wanted to say. But I think we can just have this quite informal, so please ask questions. And yeah, back to Resilient Harrison. When I first met Mike, it was through CB, and Ted as well, through CB. Mike came on the board at the same time I did, almost, very close. And Ted, you were already on the board of the Center for an Ecology-Based Economy. So that's the connection. Then I met Andrea Askendam through Michael. And they both became kind of regular members of a book club that we had started at one point. And we read a lot of books together, and we had a lot of great discussions. And at that time, I think, is when Andrea started formulating her ideas for having a climate action group at the community level. And we've just watched it grow, and we're so happy that she's just took the initiative to do this. And I know you're helping, but I kind of see Andrea as the moving force behind this. And so, Andrea, you're not here right this moment, but thank you so much for doing what you're doing and for inviting me to be part of it. So, question. How many of you know what I'm talking about when I say the word bioregioning? A little bit, like so a little bit. That's great. Because it is a relatively new term, especially the action verb, kind of verb form of the word. But this idea of bioregionalism and bioregions, well, the bioregions have been around since time immemorial, because that is the way that indigenous people have lived on the land. Basically, what is the area that supports their lifeways? All of their seasonal food places. And all of the critters that are supported in that system. What is the piece of land that's needed? What is the piece of land that supports the cultural fabric of the people? So there might be trading that happens with people who have a similar language. So it's both a biological, an ecological, a geological form, but it's also a cultural land area. So the idea of bioregioning is that we are going back to this thinking, not going back to indigenous lifeways. We're beyond that. Technology has changed, but we're going back to a thinking about how do we organize our human systems so that they fit in well with the rest of our ecosystems that we are fundamentally important to supporting life on Earth. First, for those of you who don't know, which almost all of you do, I am with the Center for an Ecology-Based Economy. We're based in Norway, Maine, right on Main Street. The building just got a facelift, and it's now green, not yellow, but it's still really beautiful. It's a beautiful old building. And we organize our work around various areas, economic areas, or just areas of interest, common interest, and through what are called working groups, basically community-based groups that have usually one staff person and one board member, at least in the working group, that envision projects for helping to move our community toward an ecology-based economy. And when the projects are envisioned, the whole organization kind of gets behind with fundraising to make the work happen. CB's roots are in two basic kind of movements that have been occurring in the fairly recent history since the 70s. One is permaculture, a design system for, again, designing human infrastructure in ways that mesh and complement and are in keeping with ecological systems. And a lot of the ideas from permaculture came out of indigenous knowledge and wisdom ways, so there is roots that go deeper still. And then the other one was transition towns, which I don't know if any of you read the books back in probably the 80s or 90s? No, 90s maybe, right? No, maybe even 2000s, right? Early 2000s. Rob Hopkins, anyway, he is still doing the good work in Great Britain and all over the world, but he was the founder of the transition movement. All I want to say about that is that the whole concept was that the community level is the level at which we can really make transformative change and play with it and experiment with it and make mistakes and get the community involved and do the work on the ground, so that it's a very, very important leverage point, if you want, for making transformational societal change. The community has a special role to play. And so CB took that idea and really ran with it, showing what could be done at the community level. And I'm very proud of just being part of such an organization that was so visionary. And so these are kind of some of the big picture things of what happens when you start really focusing on the relationships between people and their community, the relationships between people understanding that they are integral parts of ecological systems. They don't float on top of or oversee or somehow manage ecological systems. We are part of our Earth's ecology. We have a special role to play. Humans have played that role again since time immemorial. And so how do we kind of recognize our place in that system? And then when we come together around these things, what are the skills that we need to orchestrate change? And how can we help each other lift up each other's skills so that we all are capable? And this is a very rudimentary skill, but I'm talking about skills on all levels. For example, if you want to know anything about spreadsheets, that's your and he has done plenty to share those skills with our community. This is a very important concept. It's an ecological concept of nested scales that, if you just think of the cell being composed of parts, and the cell is part of tissues, and the tissues are parts of organs, and organs parts of human systems, and humans are parts of community, and so on. So that's the way that nature works, is in these nested systems. And my work as bioregional coordinator for the Center for an Ecology-Based Economy is what's sometimes called scale linking. What can I do to help the individuals that are part of the CV community and part of my own personal community feel and their way into and really find their way to give their gifts and learn about their own gifts in community. And so, and when we have a beautiful community that's really doing great, innovative work that has the power to teach others, how do we then link with other communities across a greater landscape to help, again, lift all boats? Because we've got a lot of work to do if we're going to rejigger humanity and culture and society in a way that's we can have a livable future. I mean, that's the challenge right now. We'll talk more about that. But if we're going to do that, how do we leverage and lift each other up? And how do we do that at a regional scale? And if we do it at a large enough regional scale, again, we'll talk about what that regional scale, that sweet spot is, then we have a landscape, regenerative landscape model that has global significance. Now we're actually going to be able to inform what's happening at the global scale. As an ecologist, it's very clear that all of our most serious fundamental existential problems right now are global in nature. At least in one way of thinking of them, they're global in nature, the ecological problems. So we need to do things that scale link all the way up. And that's the whole, we've been saying this forever, think locally, think globally, act locally. But how do you actually link up work so that we're, again, kind of creating this vibrancy that will affect more change than we could if we weren't linking those systems together. So just some of the basics, the factors, we already talked a little bit about this, that define a bioregion, so the topography, lands, forms, and watersheds. And some people actually do describe their bioregion as a watershed. For example, there is a bioregional movement forming in the Colorado River Basin, which is an enormous region and has that kind of bioregional coherence that we'll talk about. There's another bioregional movement happening up in the Great Lakes region, for example. So other things that come into play are the climate and the seasonal features. I love thinking about the Northeast because we have a seasonal variation that's kind of unmatched, I think, probably across the world, and or at least it's unique in the world what we have here for seasons. That's why people come from all over the world to visit us, and especially at this time of year in the fall, because we have a real distinctive seasonal shift that actually changes the way that we live on the landscape in a way that I grew up in Southern California. I can assure you those changes just don't exist. You can go out barefoot any month of the year and so on. So that's one special thing that helps to hold our region together, because again, it informs our actions, it informs our personalities, it informs our practices and our institutions and everything. The geology, the soils, because it's going to matter what kind of organisms, what kind of trees and plants can grow there. And so in addition to those biological, ecological features, it also includes human culture and the lifeways of the humans in the area. So those are the kinds of things that define the bioregion. And again, we have a unique pattern through time, and we have a unique history here in the Northeast. Hello, Andrea. We have the Algonquin speaking, the easterly Algonquin speaking tribes were here. We were the place of first contact. We were the place of most early settlement in North America, or what is called by the indigenous people Turtle Island. So that we have a shared history and a shared culture.
The question,
Yeah.
how about the governmental history, like particularly between Canada and the United States, that historically things have been different between the two over the boundary?
That's a very, very good question. So what I haven't mentioned here are the political boundaries. Because the political boundaries are more, they're not as tied to all of the ecological features.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they're not considered. We'll get to this in just a minute. Let me maybe just go forward. You'll see. I just want to answer your question. So we're envisioning, I think, the question that this slide was trying to answer. So another way to look at a bioregion is it's small enough to be recognizable as familiar. So if you went down and you saw the oak trees and the maple trees in Massachusetts, you pretty much recognize the landscape. The coast has similarities. We grow similar foods. Both are grown in the water, and there's a lot of traditional foods that we eat that are similar. So small enough to be recognizable as home, but large enough to meet the basic lifeways of all inhabitants. So so those are the two most important things in this bioregional thinking, because these together are the things that can sustain life. Political boundaries, more often than not, have been caused by conflict and are continued to be maintained through conflict and actually create conflict. So it's not to say that those boundaries are going to go away in any time in the foreseeable future, but I think you'll see as we go on tonight, I'm going to try to shift your thinking over the course of this evening toward thinking that the future of the decline of civilization, which we're witnessing at this moment, is inevitable, and to suggest that there is a great movement globally toward a very different approach to living on the planet that will be sustainable over time. We're not going to get there anytime soon. None of us will be there to see the culmination of this work. But right now is the moment to change direction so that we can get there, because this is the time. So I guess I'm kind of jumping ahead there, but I just wanted to give you a hint of where I'm going with that. I wanted to show you, so this is one interpretation of what you could call a bioregion. They call it an ecoregion, same concept, because they had the physical features, as well as you can see they actually worked with Wabanaki partners on creating this map, and it very much echoes traditional Wabanaki homelands. So they took that into account as well, because, and why indigenous interpretations of their homelands is because they were living the way that we just talked about. They lived upon the land in a way that not only was sustainable, but that enhanced the landscape, that made it more productive, made it more biodiverse. And they had learned that over many generations, 12,000 years for the Wabanaki. So there's a lot of very, very important knowledge that they still hold despite colonization. It's still passed down through their stories, this cultural knowledge, their stories, through their ceremonies, and so on. So that's one reason to take into account these indigenous homelands, because they did it already once. It was done, and we can learn from what they knew. And then we go back to that one. And so we're trying to think about, so that's one area, and I would say that this is CB's more immediate bioregion. And I even like the term, so I love using the word Acadia, because that word has ground in both Greek and then through European language as a place of tranquil beauty and renewal, right? And it also has a very similar meaning in Algonquin. So, and that's the root language of almost all the Wabanaki tribes and many of the tribes on the eastern coast. So Acadia has meaning in both cultures of a place of plenty, and I'm kind of advocating for calling our bioregion Acadia, even though there's a little bit of possibility it will become confused with the smaller Acadia, which also chose that name along those lines. So there's that. So we've been partnering with people across a larger landscape, and I'll explain why. We're going to kind of get to what brought this group together at one point, but we're working with a group of people up and down the eastern seaboard, most of which are in probably the Connecticut area. But and through that work, we're working with the Mashantucket Pequot tribe and the Eastern Pequot tribe, who are developing an intertribal alliance to try to integrate, or just at least form a collaborative network of tribes, again, in the same, pretty much in the same land footprint. And so that they're doing that, and so they suggested that we think about our bioregion being more this area, which is kind of, it's not what, we could map this pretty much any way we wanted, but just to make sure that we include those Algonquin-speaking tribes. They were part of a trade network that worked really well, and so that's one way to think about a bioregion. But you can see bioregions are envisioned in many ways. Here's this interpretation that's done by a group called One Earth. Somewhat different, but also similar for our bioregion here in the Northeast. But here's the kicker, is that work is still pretty new. First bioregional thinking occurred in modern bioregional thinking occurred in the 1970s, and it's now just kind of experiencing a real resurgence, as if the time has come when this thinking actually is starting to make sense to scientists and investors and people with power. And so I think that's one of the reasons that it is starting to take off. But anyway, so bioregions are still in the process of being discovered and imagined, and each one's emerging from its own unique place, and it's the people in the area that will ultimately define it over time. And it's not important to draw lines on a map. It's kind of important to kind of understand that there is a land base. That's very important. But as far as the border being really concrete, that's a long process. A bioregioning group who has been doing it since the 70s, uninterrupted, is Cascadia. That's another reason I like Acadia, the name of our bioregion, because it would be a nice bookend. But they're along the west coast, from Alaska to northern California. It includes almost all of the salmon rivers out there, the landscape, the watersheds that feed those salmon rivers. And they have a full-blown map. They have annual conferences. They have a flag. They're quite far advanced. They're going to have a bioregional conference somewhere out there next year. I'm planning to go. It will be the first time since back, I think, in the 80s, that we'd have a full-blown national bioregional conference. This is a writer, thinker that I follow. His work is lovely. I don't know if you know Thomas Berry at all, but I think that you love him, yeah. He started off a theologian and ended up calling himself a geologian because he got so excited about geography, ecology, and he is a very profound thinker, but he was one of those early bioregional thinkers, and this is what he said: a bioregion is a self-propagating, self-nourishing, self-educating, self-governing, self-healing, and self-fulfilling community. It just keeps regenerating. If you think about life on Earth, well, that's 3.5 billion years, but Earth itself has been basically recycling the same material that it was born with for 4.5 billion years without trouble until just recently, when it's not recycling those things effectively anymore. And we know how to unblock all of that stuck matter, but we really need to start thinking back in the idea of things regenerating over and over and over and over again. So that's what I think he's getting at with this is the bioregion is where this is happening. I want to just go here for a very short amount of time, but it's important to really understand why this work is important to do now. Otherwise, we could just kind of go on thinking we'll do the best we can. But why it might be important to reorganize our society around this more bioregional concepts is because, one, our climate system is collapsing globally. We have not, despite all the work to draw down carbon emissions are still going up. And carbon emissions are not the only problem. This is really important. They're a huge problem. But the other side of that is what made the climate in the first place and what sustains the climate. And that's life. Life on planet Earth. That thin skin, which is our biosphere, is what created the climate that makes it life possible for us. And there's the water cycle that is part of that, but life plays a very important role in the water cycle. And as you know, my water vapor is a huge greenhouse gas, much more of a greenhouse gas than carbon, and it is maintained through the water cycle, and the water cycle is maintained through life. So we can't just, that's important, drawing down carbon, but we also need to support life on planet Earth. And we can't do one at the expense of the other, or we can't forget about the other and the importance of it. So that's what's so beautiful about the work that CB is doing, because it's not just about let's decarbonize our energy, but how do we grow food to have more abundant and rich and living soils, right? How do we grow food that way that makes life richer in the process instead of depleting life or polluting life? So that's what this is about. So the system is collapsing, and it's not just about climate. So this was it's an ongoing study by the Stockholm Resilience Center. Hundreds of scientists working on modeling what is going on the planet and trying to understand where we are relative to a sustainable ecological footprint on the planet. And you can see that we're out of the planetary boundaries on a number of these areas, climate change being one of them. We'll just talk about a couple more. This one's biosphere integrity, so that's biodiversity. We're living in what is called the sixth mass extinction. We're losing insects at an absolutely alarming rate, and plants can't live without, 70% of plants need pollinators in order to live. So that's bad. This one, novel entities, those are things that we have created that are not recyclable in any, life time that is meaningful, that just persist in the environment. And we don't even know what the impacts of those things like PFAS, microplastics, and the fact that they are in rainwater all over the earth, no matter how clean the people's practices might be in any given area. They're in the breast milk of mothers across the entire planet. We don't even know about that. So that system that created those problems, we really need to look at it with very clear eyes. We don't need to blame anybody. In many ways, it was a group project toward progress and prosperity, and there was a lot of good thinking in that. And the science that developed through that system is also profoundly beneficial to us, and now is going to be absolutely crucial to turning this boat around. And just speaking of technology, just really quickly, technology is miraculous, and I don't know what I would do without it right now, but these days. But with technology that is not based in any kind of wisdom, that there's no discretion, and no looking at it and saying, what could possibly happen with this technology, and how can we, make this technology a little less prone to being used for ill, and those kinds of questions. To have wisdom to choose the technologies is really important. So anyway, so there was a person, Janella Meadows, and maybe some of you heard of the very, very famous book at this point that she helped to write in the 70s, called Limits to Growth. And she was the lead author, I think the only woman in this group of scientists from MIT. The computer that they had to do their work with was the size of this room. And they tried to chart out and understand and model, if we kept on our current trajectory as human beings, doing the things we're doing, creating the carbon that we're creating, polluting the water that we're polluting, how long can we go before we've reached our limit? And they called that trajectory business as usual. And that term, business as usual, came from that book. Because that, so we, and then they had, what if we, accelerated, and what if we learned to live more in keeping with natural ecosystems? And we have pretty much tracked business as usual line. And there is a limit to the growth. But I don't want to talk about that right now. What I do want to talk about is that she also was thinking about systems. How do we change systems so that we could actually change our systems swiftly enough to make a difference, to make a difference before we reach that limit to growth, right? So instead of going to the breaking point, how do we bend? And so she kind of weighed out all of these things, and she used this this graphic to illustrate the most leverage that you can do. One is to shift the worldview, the paradigm that informs the thinking that you're trying to move away from, and then the power to actually just think beyond paradigms. And who knows what that even really means. But this one is really, really important because we all think within a mindset, a mind frame, a worldview. And there's variation in all of our worldviews. We have independent worldviews, but we also have cultural points of view. So we're talking about the cultural story. And Mike knows my love of the idea that stories can change the world. And because we used to have some good discussions about that in our book club. But so this is just a really very short way of thinking about our current mechanistic worldview. It is the dominant cultural story on planet Earth at this point. It's based on separation. There's a lot of scholarship that has gone into why this is, but it's basically just boiling it down based on separation, individual, and a view of life as atomistic and mechanistic. So there's a beautiful essay from this scientist who said he went into biology because he wanted to study life. He just found life so fascinating. So he went into biology. And then he realized that living forms were made out of cells, and so he went into cellular biology, and then microbiology, and then he understood that our biology is also made of atoms. So he went into physics and quantum physics, and he said, and by the time I got there, life had gone through my fingers. It was all about atoms and quarks and where was the life. So the idea that we have used what some thinkers call, which refer to as our left hemisphere, which is the part of our brain that we use for mapping and making sense making and categorizing, defining, all of these things. It's really good, separating things down, dissecting problems into the smaller components. That is, our left hemisphere is awesome at that. Our right hemisphere is the part of our brain that's really comprehensive thinker and sees the connections between things. There's a thinker, his name is Ian McGilchrist, and he's written 2 enormous tomes, and he's a psychologist, a neurobiologist, and a philosopher. And he says that his theory is that we have, through this kind of giving over everything to this scientific atomistic thinking, we've let our left side of our brain dominate our thinking, when really the most, the part of our brain that understands best in terms of full reality is our right comprehensive side of our brain. So, so this, he says, we've kind of given much too much over to the left side of our brain. We need to know how to exercise the right side of our brain again through synthesized thinking, art, all kinds of relational activities. So anyway, that's the mechanistic worldview. But while that worldview has been the dominant worldview for 500 years or so, there has been there are people around the world that have maintained a worldview that does not think in these mechanistic, atomistic ways, and it is a more life-affirming worldview. Their cultural story is based on interrelatedness and respect for all life. Humans are not the top of the pyramid, but they're part of the circle of life. And most of these cultures are what we now call indigenous culture, but as one indigenous gentleman pointed out to me, if you live on planet Earth, you're indigenous. We're all indigenous to this Earth, and some of us are just closer to these cultural practices than others, but all of us were colonized at one point or another, our cultures. So we have a lot in common. We have much more in common than we have differences, human beings. So how do we get from that worldview to this worldview? I like to think, and I'm not the first thinker to put it in these terms, Daniel Christian Wall, there's a fellow, Tom Chi, others have kind of charted out, like, what we're doing is we're heading toward a horizon, but we're going to see more of the next horizon as we get to each horizon. So we don't know exactly what this is going to look like, but we know we can head toward the next horizon. So if you could think about it, we're currently in the extractive economy down here. The next horizon, we might get to the point where what we're heading for now, and CB is really part of this work, heading toward that next horizon, a less extractive economy, maximizing value, and what I'm talking about, value, all kinds of value, community value, the value that people feel of doing good work in community, those kinds of values, but maximizing the value that we receive and the quality of whatever it is that we're talking about, minimizes material use and minimizes waste and minimizes pollution. So that's one way to think about every technological innovation that's created or every new gadget that's made. And could we hold it up against some kind of bar? Does it maximize value and quality? Does it minimize material use, waste, and pollution? Pretty simple, straightforward guidelines, but would be right there, huge change. And when we get there, then we can start really understanding, perhaps, and again, I think we're going to learn a lot along the way. I'll be there to see some of it, not all of it, but a truly ecology-based economy, where all of our human systems are living in harmony, are in harmony with living systems. All the stuff is being recycled and regenerated like planet Earth has been doing for 4.5 billion years. And we have the technology to do, and we have the know-how to do. And we go back to the political issues, that's kind of the sticking point at this point. And the economic system that we have is also a problem. And then the next horizon may be truly a regenerative economy. And I was on a call recently with a woman, her name is Lila June. She's an indigenous member of the Dene tribe. And she said that regenerative to her just simply means that you leave something better than you found it. So not the same, not that you just didn't do any destruction to it or you left it alone, but you do something better. That's regenerative. And that's a nice simple way to think about that too. So have a truly regenerative economy, which is actually maximizing diverse energy flows. And I want to just talk just a moment about what I mean by that. So if a photon of sunlight falls upon the pavement it heats that little piece of pavement, and then the waste heat is reflected back into the atmosphere. So that's that one photon. If that photon falls on a solar panel, especially if there's other photons, it's going to help power perhaps a household, perhaps several households. And so you're getting a little more diverse energy flow. You've now made that photon jump into those households. In other words, the energy from that photon is going into those households and firing up the coffee pot or whatever. So that's much more diverse. And then, but what if the photon falls on a leaf? And that leaf is eaten by an insect, and that insect is eaten by a bird, and that bird is, it carries something that needs to be carried to some other critter. So just thinking about what can we do with everything that we do that maximizes its ability to do good. And that's another thing that we'll be doing. And when we get there, to have a truly regenerative economy, then we'll be a net benefit for planet Earth, as opposed to what some people, and I don't blame them for thinking like we're a blight on the planet. I've heard people say, well, if it just weren't for humans, this would be, planet would be better off. I don't agree with that, because I know we're part of this system, and we have, again, it's in our deep cultural DNA. We know how to live on planet Earth in a way that is sustainable, and we've just kind of forgotten because it's been convenient to do so. Oops, didn't mean to do that. So again, I'm going to kind of go back to the scale linking. So we're working at the community level with CB and broadening that to what region of Western Maine where a lot of our community resilience partnership work is happening. And so that's kind of scale linking up that level. But if people across a greater and greater landscape are coming up with regenerative outcomes simultaneously, just like the frequencies increase their amplitudes when they're in coherence with each other, when we're aligned in our kind of vision of what is possible, when we're in alignment, it amplifies the effectiveness of all of our work. And so that is like a phenomenon that we can work with and that we can use as kind of a goal. So I have been as CB's bioregional coordinator, but we have been as a group of people who are doing this work in this Northeast region to come together to develop a plan for this greater bioregion to move forward in coherence together and amplify each other's work. How can we do that? So you can see that CB is one of the founding members. These are all the founding members, but there are some tribal members, and that will grow as the Intertribal Alliance grows. And there are movements in play already to bring the Wabanaki tribes, or which of those tribes that may want to, into that alliance as well. But that work is very slow. It moves at the speed of trust, and we're very determined to take the time to work in harmony with our Indigenous allies in this region, because we don't want to redo the same mistakes that we are trying to change. And by having that Indigenous participation in the decision making, it will prevent us from making those same mistakes again. So it's worth taking the time to build those relations of trust. But there's people there's no one quite like CB out there in the world, is what I'm coming to understand. I was actually told by that recently from a fellow who works for the Nature Conservancy here in Maine. That CB is a kind of a unique organization, but there is this Alliance for Mystic River Watershed, the non-governmental organization, that has similarities as Wellspring Common as well. And then the Design School for Regenerating Earth, which is a global network of people who are doing, and people and groups that are doing this bioregional work. people who are interested in earth law and rights of nature, people who are interested in systems change, Healthy Soils Network. This is a networking platform that has a lot of great potential for us. They have a lot of expertise in using the technology that's available now to create a future where that technology might not be needed, and others you can see. But it's a pretty rich and robust group of R3.0. They have global a global following, I guess you would say. This is the mission, our current mission, to regenerate our land, water, communities by supporting indigenous resurgence in culture, knowledge, and governance, and by transforming human systems and cultural practices to be reciprocal with natural ones. So we just want to be very aligned from the beginning. The values are very aligned with that mission: respect, reciprocity, again, giving back in good measure for anything received, responsibility for our actions, collaboration, and this deep commitment to being in right relation with our indigenous allies. So just to kind of look at what it might look like, what we're thinking, and we're thinking that the work will largely begin in rural areas. Most of the groups that you saw there are based in rural areas, or have work that they do in rural areas. So we think probably the initial work will be happening at the rural scale, which is great for us and good because CB will be able to play a great role in that. But basically, to reinvest in the land, have money flowing in to local systems, as opposed to all the decision making and all the funding flowing to kind of top-down systems, to bring all of that wealth down to the local level where it can be used to power regenerative agroforestry projects, bio-based material projects, and food systems as well. And then as that work grows, it will be able to help support urban regeneration, and there is work being done in urban settings right now, so they're kind of co-evolving. But in some ways, I think the rural has some advantages in this regard. But at the urban level, there'd be more advanced green manufacturing, urban housing, and skilled labor. And that those two areas would be, kind of feeding each other and sharing with each other. And then the value-added goods from these systems would be going back into the investment system. So again, this idea of circular flows. Another way to think about it is a tree growing from the roots, where the roots are really education, cultural change, thinking about our legal structures. I just met with a group of professors from College of the Atlantic that are thinking along terms of rights of nature. What would that do to our governance structures if we really kind of took a crack at who gets rights in our system. Indigenous co-governance, collaborative planning and design, knowledge commoning, kind of mapping out these regenerative practices and practitioners. And so again, making it easier for networking, for sharing skills, and doing analysis at the systems level as opposed to just the discrete community level, so that we can really upgrade our system in a way that makes sense for the system, but also makes sense to the communities. And then that knowledge, wisdom, and everything going, so that's kind of the roots coming up from the ground. Those that are making the energy would be basically this is a different tree. Sorry, we have two tree things, and I'm kind of mixed up here because okay, forget that. Anyway, so what that would do, if we were able to move it through the trunk of the tree, in this case, that's going to be where the funding is added, then it allows for all of these regenerative practices to come up from that ground. Oops, sorry about that. I didn't include the other tree slide, but I was kind of thinking this was it. Another schema, and that I don't want to kind of nerd out on this too much, but it is kind of interesting to see the thinking that's been going into this. That we would start by creating a bioregional finance facility. In fact, we'd have a couple of bioregional finance facilities, one of which is a bioregional regeneration trust, and the other one is a venture studio. Those are two forms of bioregional funding facilities that could help to fund this work. And there still is a need for a philanthropy, so donors and value-aligned investors can flow funding into these facilities, and then the funds from those facilities can go into bioregional regeneration projects. And so our group, the Northeast Woodlands Bioregioning Collective, has actually come up with a portfolio of projects that are aligned across the bioregion and a budget for each of those. And so the money would flow into these projects that would enable the conditions for various regenerative enterprises to be launched, just like CB is an incubator of cooperatives or for-profit ventures, and then that, through the tax system and contributions would go back into supporting the organizational team and the Intertribal Alliance, who in turn are helping to manage the Bioregional Regeneration Trust and the Venture Studio that are then flowing these philanthropic funds. So again, setting up a system where the funds will keep flowing through the very design of the system. This is a book that was written on bioregional financing facilities. We actually were part of a cohort of people from all over the world who were part of what they called their first bioregional finance facility cultivator, to teach us all how this work could be done. But their approach basically, it centers on regeneration over extraction. It embraces holistic structures, not rigid hierarchies. It distributes energy, nutrients, information, even money, like flows in natural systems, and it functions at all scales, reflecting ecological invariance. So it is a different approach to finance. And it was developed by this author. Her name is Samantha Power. And Scott just went and spent like 2 days in a retreat with Samantha and some of her colleagues learning more about this approach. And as I said, we were one of a group of bioregional teams from across mostly North and South America in this first cohort. And that was our Northeast Bioregioning Collective. And so just to say that we do have a plan, and we have, again, these portfolio projects. This is what we're asking for. We actually went to we did a presentation at a place called the Foundation House in Greenwich, Connecticut, to a bunch of wealthy investors who are interested in this work. And we pitched our idea for our portfolio, which amounts to $5.4 million over a 3-year period. And that this money would be going into bioregionally aligned projects. CB has projects in the portfolio. We do have 2 ideas for supporting Wabanaki sovereignty and Wabanaki land back, again, as a gesture of our intention to do this work right from the start. But it's more than a gesture. We want our Wabanaki allies at our side, helping us to make wise decisions. And we also have a pretty grand vision for a bioregional living and learning center this is a long-term vision that was even in place before CB was founded, apparently. The idea would be to have it at Roberts Farm, or if that couldn't be negotiated, something similar, but a place where people could learn how to live well on the land, where we could do all kinds of food system field trials, where we could share, again, do our skill sharing, where people could come and spend time in internships and those kinds of things. We also have another project called the Bioregioning Coherence Project, and that I think has great potential, and it would be a whole other talk to talk about that one. But if you had any questions, I could maybe just give like a little snippet of that project. But what I did want to talk about is one that I think you guys might want to get involved in, and this is more immediate, but it's also a bioregioning project. And it's a very good example of how we can leverage kind of pilot work done at the community scale to do something that's going to be impactful on a greater regional scale, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then another thing that we put in there is small grants to flow to our local and regional regenerators. So we would basically serve as a flow fund or a small bioregional finance facility, getting some funds that we could then distribute to people who were doing projects on their farm, and they needed materials and those kinds of very small, but very meaningful projects. So this project I'm going to talk to you about, the Inland Flood Project, began at CB's 2024 Convergence. We had a panel on inland flooding. It was following that winter of 2023 when we had just crazy flooding in many parts of the state, including in Western Maine was very hard hit. The town of Bethel was basically underwater. Farmington was surrounded by water on all sides. It became an island, I think. And so flooding was big on people's mind, and so we had this panel. And one of the ideas that came up amongst the people was, well, we really need a way to kind of monitor flood sites so we know how much damage is being done so that people can be compensated for and made whole after floods. That was just one simple reason that was first mentioned. And then people said, well, it would be also really good to have people monitoring so we can be learning how much more flooding is becoming an issue. And often when we collect the data, then good policy and funding can follow the data. So, but we need to have good data about who's getting flooded, how are they being impacted, what are the stories of their hardship and those kinds of things. So we want to be able to collect that data as well. So we envisioned and created the Inland Flood Project. We got a 3-year grant from the Betterment Fund that really helped kick that off. And the Telstar high school students that helped first imagine it with us called it Rising Above Rising Waters, and we've kept that because it's a beautiful tagline for the project. And we're working hard to make this vision a reality. And our initial partners were Androscoggin River Watershed Council, Androscoggin Valley, oh no, not them, of course CB, Gulf of Maine Research Institute, and the Oxford County Emergency Management Agency. And since then, the Androscoggin Valley Council of Governments, Mount Washington Observatory, Northeastern University, we're doing a really cool project with them. The Betterment Fund funded us, and now the Nature Conservancy Maine chapter. So and we're going to be meeting with the Sierra Club next week, who also wants to be part of this project. So it seems to have hit a chord. We'll be, just talk a little bit about it. These are the goals. So we want to identify and document the high risk and repetitive damage areas, mitigate personal and community property loss for more informed land use planning, integrating project data with the National Weather Services for more comprehensive understanding of flood and damages and community impacts, improving regional hazard mitigation plans, and creating a living compendium of stories, social and emotional impacts of flooding events, and so on. So those are our goals, and the site has been launched on the Gulf of Maine Research Institute's EcoINet platform or Ecosystem Investigation Network platform. Can submit data. It's ready to receive and store data at this point. It's missing a key feature, so it's why we haven't launched it officially yet, but it's going to have what's called a GIS, ArcGIS story map embedded in it. And that story map will show you where all the sites are, show you who's monitoring them. If the people want the data to be visible to the public, you can pull up their data, learn more about their project. You can see, oh, nobody is collecting data here in this part of the state. I might like to choose that site because I know it does flood from time to time. So that the story map is kind of a key part of how it's going to work, and we're still working on that, but that will come very soon, probably not by the end of October, but mid-November for sure. So, and then we will start doing outreach and hoping to engage people in the collection of this information, because this will be a citizen science project where people can voluntarily adopt a site to monitor, and they'll be given instructions and suggestions and guidance on how to do the monitoring. They'll be given information about if it's an existing site, what's the parking light like here, is it accessible with wheelchair, those kinds of bits of information. So I think this will be a really valuable tool, and we are going to want a lot of participation from citizen groups in this, so maybe that would be another thing to talk about at some point. And so I'm going to just finish this way, that this is Danella Meadows, who we spoke of earlier, and she said the future can't be predicted, but it can be envisioned and brought lovingly into being. And so that's the question. And I don't know if it's there. Well, there was my end slide, but it was giving me trouble, so I think it's missing my contact information. I can just hand you a card. That's the easiest way to give it to you. Perhaps let me just see if it's there. No, it never came through. Anyway, that's my presentation, and yeah, thanks for listening. I really appreciate that, and I would love if you had any feedback, thoughts, questions. Because I live and breathe this stuff all the time, I think I sometimes leave gaps in my explanation of things, and so I don't know if everything I say makes sense. So please help me fill in the gaps by asking me questions.
Do you have a GoPIF contact that was,
Is
GoPIF involved?
Yeah, GoPIF is, I'll tell you how they're involved. There is a new office, governmental office. It's called the Office of Climate Resilience, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And they will be doing a lot of inland flood modeling. Have you ever gone on NOAA's website and seen the climate models where you can bring up a location like on the coast of Maine and say, what would this location look like in 6 inches of flooding? What would this location look like in a foot of flooding? And it's the really beautiful graphics will kind of just show you that. So for coastal planners, that's a really valuable tool. But inland planners don't have such a tool. So there's work afoot to get the data to do the monitoring. And the professor that we're working with at Northeastern University, in addition, we're working with them because he has a capstone class, senior capstone class, where the students are working on this project as their project. So we share the project with them. There's an education group, there's an outreach group, there's a data management group, and historical flooding group. And they're all working on this project together. But his work, his non-professorial work, his research work, is on inland flooding and modeling. He's going to work on, I think that's the Penobscot and the Kennebec, and I think that we're convincing him to include the Androscoggin in his study area, and that we would start developing. So that office is one of the things that they're doing, is supporting that work. And I did speak to the new head of that department about the work that we're doing, and they were very interested. And I made a pitch for more stream gauges, if they do have resources at any point, and he said, we don't have any resources yet. But because right now, the feds and the state are pulling stream gauges out of streams because they're expensive technology, they're expensive to maintain, and money is going away for that kind of work in the federal, at the federal level. But one thing that's really cool about that is that that's a completely separate thing that when the students at Northeastern heard about that, they have a program there where they offer a prize, like an X Prize, for some kind of technological innovation. So some of the students in that group said, we are going to make an inexpensive, do-it-yourself stream gauge that maybe these community groups who are doing this work could deploy. So that would be a nice outcome. And if that was the case, maybe we would get some money to help create the kits or whatever it was, to get a whole bunch of those out there. Yeah, might.
So, Roberta, this has been great. Thank you. I haven't seen one of your presentations in 2 years, maybe?
I don't even know, yeah,
Maybe
2 years,
more,
yeah.
2 years. And it's just really impressive to me to get a sense of how much you've learned over that period and how much work you and your colleagues in this have been doing in the last 2 years. I don't know whether it's all been done in the last 2 years or whether I now just get a better sense of what is happening, but it's quite amazing. So before I stop here, I wanted you to make sure that people knew about the presentation next week. So tell people about that too.
Yeah, so first of all, the Northeast Woodlands Bioregioning Collective, this November is our 1-year anniversary. So that, we've gotten a lot done in a year.
Yeah, that's great.
But we've got a lot to do. What is our actual organizational structure, right? So we're not even really super clear on that because there's so many options that we could go with. And a collective of organizations has a lot of value. It has a lot of agility to it, but there's also something nice about having a governance structure. And it might be, we're still, so again, we've got a long way to go, but it is fascinating work, and I'm sure mistakes will be made along the way as well, because that's how we do learn. So there's that. And then, yes, so this was kind of introductory level to like what is bioregioning about, and we will do some of this, I think, at the talk that's coming up. Scott Vallon and I. So Scott, this is interesting too, Mike, and I don't know if you got this little story, but Scott was very supportive, as was the board, of me jumping off the board of directors at CB and writing my own job description as bioregional coordinator, because I could see CB's value in this. Oh, and I'm going to just take one quick little diversion. In this work, I'm working with many people, all kinds of organizations. CB is held in extremely high esteem because we're not just theoretical, we're action-based, community-based, people-centered, powered, and that holds just tremendous potency for people who are thinking in these terms. So CB is seen as a leader, which is super cool. But anyway, but Scott was very supportive, But he was busy being executive director of CB. Wasn't able to get very involved in the work, the bioregional work. So I was kind of out there doing it, bringing back tales of what's going on, continuing to be supportive. But as he's been transitioning out of his role, he's been getting more and more involved in the bioregioning work. And he, as I said, went to that very high-powered session with Samantha Powers, and he's gung-ho. So he will be continuing to help with this work, but from a new position. Like, it would be really interesting to see where he goes with that. But I'm excited. So he and I, that'll be his last week. In fact, I think 29th, he's done. The 31st, is there 31 days in this month? So just a couple days before his last day. And we're going to do have just kind of a round table where people who have, we invited the whole CB community, and I invited the Northeast Bioregioning group, and some other invited people, but we're hoping for a small group of people coming and sharing the work that they're doing and kind of envisioning how we activate this smaller region. Because I've been working at the larger regional scale, and now it's time to bring all of that, those contacts, all of that infrastructure kind of back, and seeing how CB's more localized region fits into that. And so that's what we're hoping. This will be a kind of a brainstorming session. And I will share more about that Bioregioning Coherence Project, because that's super exciting. It's like really cool.
And that talk is this Wednesday at CB.
Yes, coming Wednesday, the 29th.
I'm also looking at the clock, and I don't know what time this is supposed to end.
Whatever.
Was there?
If you guys are done, I'm done. But if you have more questions, I'm glad to stay.
We'll miss it on Wednesday. We'll be
Yeah,
out
we'll be in Connecticut.
of state.
That's fine. But I don't know. You'll hear about it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, too.
Good will come of it, I'm pretty sure, from the people who are already coming.
Are you tied into GoPIF in this thing? Not sorry, GoPIF. MOFCA.
Well, I did CB did its very first tabling at MOFCA 2 years ago, where I was able to talk to people about bioregioning. Because the year before at MOFCA, I just went and talked to everybody. Like, you're all doing this incredibly regenerative work, but how are we working together? Like, and that was the part, people could see that is what could be really fruitful. And so then the second year was when CB went officially, and I did a presentation, and because CB was a newcomer, we had never been there before, we were given the last slot of the day in the tent right next to the train, and the talk before me had 2 people, and I thought, well, this is going to go badly. But we had at peak, we had like 16 people show up, which I was really thrilled. And those people are now on CB's mailing list, some of which don't even live in the United States. And so we made more contacts there. And this year, we didn't do anything special for the bioregion because we had just had the convergence, where we had a convening at the convergence. We called it our bioregional track. But we had people from all across the Northeast bioregion came and did presentations and had held sessions. So that was another move. But what I would like to do, and what others are talking about, is to have a similar convening at the Common Ground Fair, and have it like a track there, have a tent there, and that could be done. And Scott did go to a convening that was organized by one of our partners in this work. They're called Permatours. And have you met Scotty Gooseman?
No.
Out at Robert's Farm. He put their yurt up, and anyway, Permatours they have this really great model where they have little regenerative projects that need to be done. So they will go and they will teach the community how to do this, how to put up a yurt, how to build a root cellar, how to make a tiny house. And so they not only do the project, but they make a learning experience out of it, which is a beautiful model. So, but they had a big convening up at the Common Ground Fairgrounds. That was like 2 or 3 weeks before the Common Ground Fair. It was sometime in the summer, and I couldn't go to that one either. So Scott went to that one and spoke on behalf of CB, and he was on the panel talking about our bioregioning work there. So the Common Ground Fair is a player in all of this, but we don't have like a member of MOFGA in our like immediate network yet. I think that will come. Because that's a no-brainer, really, because they have so much, already so much infrastructure, 65,000 people.
And lots of
come to their
young
fairs.
people.
Like, yeah, lots of people. Did you go to the fair this year?
Yes.
I didn't get to
It
go.
was amazing.
What did you say?
I didn't go, but you
Oh, I
did.
think,
Yeah. And when you go, like, I've been CB's anchor there for these past 2 years, so I go on Thursday, set up my tent, so I'm ready to get everything in place, because when you're tabling there, you have to be there for the duration.
right.
And so, and just to make sure that there's always coverage, I stay until Sunday. But it's just like, it's neat, because it's like you get really into the whole, you can't see that fair in one day anyway, so you need a few days. Anyway, so that's the connection there, but hopefully that will grow. And if you've got any particular persons that you think might be interested in talking, I'd love to talk to somebody.